One of the things I've been thinking about is almost like historical jealousy. And this is where the body count conversation comes in. What have you come to believe about how much body count matters, and then how can people deal with historical jealousy better?
Well, the thing is, it's now become a big topic of debate, and men are like, oh, body count, body count, body count. It's a big deal. Here's what I really say about body count. The testament of your body count is more your rejection rate than how many people you slept with. Now, if you are, let's take for somebody like you, for example, who's got a big name on social media, looks great, access to loads of women through the nightclub. Now, if your body count is, let's say if it's 10, but you've had hundreds of girls throwing themselves at you, yours is actually still low. Whereas if another guy who has no access to women, but finally gets 1 or 2 girls to sleep with him, on paper it might be less, but his rejection rate is so low. And now instead of looking at how many people sleep with, look at their rejection rate. Now if a girl has slept with 5 men or 10 men, but only 5 or 10 men have tried to approach her, that means every man that tries gets access. But if she's a really attractive woman, she might have higher, but her rejection rate is higher. So really look at how many people your partner is rejecting rather than just their body count. Because on paper, a really unattractive man who has nothing going for him, his body count's going to be low. Doesn't mean he's a decent man. It's just that he didn't have the opportunity. Similarly, women that are not that nice to be around, not that kind, not that pretty, not that attractive, hers is going to be low. Doesn't mean she's virtuous. It's just that she didn't have access. It's the ones that have access but choose to be selective. That's what you should be looking at, is their selectivity.
Problem is, you can't ask them the number, like how many rejections have you done in your life?
Yes, you can't. That's the hard part. But what you can tell is how easily excited this person is by the opposite gender. It comes quite naturally. You can tell when people are super excited when the opposite gender pays some attention, and other people who are totally immune to it. That person that has a glee attached to attention is always going to maybe not have a higher body count because they might not get access, but they've got more risk of diversion because they get too much ego boost from the opposite sex and not from other areas of their life. So I think body count really has to depend on the person's ability to say no to sex. It's not just how many people they slept with, but how many people can they say no to?
I've never heard this frame before. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. What do you think about that? What do you think?
The body count conversation is so skewed because the world that we're living in now is not representative of where it would have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But the thing that I'm most interested in is historical jealousy. Yeah. So hearing stories about what your partner used to get up to, even if it happened once, right? And it's so strange. You didn't even know that they existed. You didn't know them. They didn't know you. They couldn't have said no because they were waiting for you to come. Maybe this was a one-time thing or whatever. And it triggers, especially in men, it triggers such a visceral fear, right? Of inadequacy, of like jealousy, but it's strange. Like, how can you be jealous about a thing that happened before you even knew who your partner was? So talk me through your conception of historical jealousy.
What happens with historical jealousy is human beings in general, we prefer pain we can predict. Predictable pain is almost more welcome than, definitely more welcome than anything unexpected. Now, what we do with retroactive jealousy is we hold on to the past as a way of predicting how they're going to hurt us in the future. The more you're anxious you are, the more you perceive threats in your environment. So what's happened with people who are jealous of the past is essentially they have a core belief that their partner's going to hurt them at some stage anyway. Now, if there's no present day evidence for that, they will look for it in the past and use that as a way of creating hypotheses of how they might hurt you in the future, and therefore be mentally prepared for the sabotage. Now, so essentially what they're doing is preparing themselves for the worst, but they can't find evidence, so they look for the past, and it's usually because of a fear of abandonment that they have within themselves. And I know it's more common in men because their fear is more stimulated by the fear of cuckoldry, that she might, like evolutionary wise, she might have a child with somebody else and pretend it's yours, that fear. So it's ingrained in them. But more time, that fear is activated when there's been some childhood abandonment.
What about women? What are women worried about?
We're worried. We worry not as much about retro. We only really worry about previous exes if there is some financial or emotional investment still going on, usually when there's kids. So what happens is women tend to get jealous of the ex-wife where they've got kids and stuff like that. We get jealous of exes that are still a priority in their resources. So we're only threatened by women that have access to the resources, whether that's energy, time, or money. But if he's not giving them that, we are more worried about future threats.
That's interesting. I imagine that must make a lot of the moving on, starting a new relationship as a guy that has got some history. You know, earlier on you mentioned
kids.
If you're going to go for somebody that's a little bit older, it may be even in some regards a green flag that they've been through some relationships and got some baggage, you know, from that. But you also have the
jealousy
inclusion of the previous partner and potentially the previous kid, resources, attention, so on and so forth. So that must be a difficult situation to navigate.
A lot of women suffer from that. They're really, really so jealous of the ex and the children and so on and so forth. And it is very difficult. I can imagine it would be horrible. But one thing that, again, if your husband has a good co-parenting relationship and is a good father, it's a foresight into how good of a partner he will be to you and your children. He prioritizes his children is really, really important. Now, a lot of women want a man to prioritize them over their children, but what kind of man is that? A man that prioritizes a woman over his children, what kind of man is that? It's not a man you're going to be attracted to in the future, especially when you have children with him, because that means the next woman in his life can take that priority. You need a man that prioritizes his children, and try and see it as something you admire in him rather than jealous of him, because it's a trait that's going to come in very handy when you have children with him, God willing. But that guy that is just all over the place and doesn't prioritize his kids, it's only handy in the short term.
We'll get back to talking to Sadia in 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Factor. If you are too busy this autumn to cook but still want to make sure that you're eating well, Factor is the solution. With Factor, you can skip the extra trip to the grocery store, plus all of the chopping and prepping and cleaning up, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality that you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. And right now, their autumn menu has some absolute bangers, like a cranberry pecan chicken and an apple Dijon pork chop. Or if, like me, you're struggling to hit your protein goals, you can try their Protein Plus meals with 30 grams or more of protein per serving. I cannot tell you how big of a life hack it is to only be 2 minutes away from a 30 gram of protein meal at all times. Right now, you can get 50% off by heading to the link in the description below, or going to factormeals.com/MW50 and using the code MW50 at checkout. That's factormeals.com/MW50 and MW50 at checkout. What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe.